FaizSportsTalk back at it with another video talking some NFL, talking football, talking fantasy football because football season is upon us, which means fantasy football season is also upon us as well. And I know a lot of people, including myself, play fantasy football. So I'm here to break down and sort of give you guys my tips and tricks to win fantasy football. Now, I'm not trying to brag and say I win every year, but I do a good job of consistently being consistent and finishing usually, top 3. Last year I won, I think, first in one league, third in another, and I forget the rest of them, but usually I do a good job. I never usually finish last, and there are tips and tricks that I use every year, day in and day out, that consistently help me do well in fantasy football, and so I'm here to share those with you guys, okay? And these tips are not really specific to any level of fantasy football. It could work if you're a rookie, it could work if you're an expert. It doesn't matter if you just started playing, or it doesn't matter if you've been playing for years. Usually, if you've been playing for years and you know about some of these, maybe you can hone in on them as well. And of course, if you're new, these are really going to help. So with that being said, let's get started real quick. You guys should follow me on Twitter. I'll put the link in the description and right here for you guys at Faizan Qureshi. I can answer fantasy football questions for you guys year long as the season starts, so please make sure to follow me on Twitter. But with that being said, let's get started. One tip by far that I will give to anybody that wants to start playing fantasy football, it's the #1 question I ask everybody, even when they ask me questions about fantasy football, who to start, who to play, who to start, who to sit. What's the format? Okay, what is the league format that you are playing? Is it PPR? Is it standard? Is it half-point PPR? What is it? Because that is so important to the draft, to the ability of the players that you pick, to what players you want to look at. It sets the tone for everything. So I need to know, and you need to know more importantly, the format of your league. If it's PPR, you're going to want to draft receivers more than running backs if it's because it is point per reception. But also it could work for drafting pass catching backs. That's what I would go for. If it's standard, I'm going more RB heavy than I'm going receiver heavy. So it is a huge component of winning your fantasy football league, knowing the format of your league and what it is. I like PPR. It's fun. It's high scoring. I'm a big fan of that, which usually means I draft receivers more than running backs. But with that being said, you guys should know. And then this next tip also goes in hand with this tip, and it's knowing the roster size and the roster components of the team that you're going to assemble. With every league, the league commissioner can set the positions, and usually standard positions is 1 quarterback, 2 wide receivers, 3 wide receivers. I should say 2 wide receivers actually, 2 running backs, a tight end, a flex. But it could vary a lot, and that's what I'm trying to get at here, is if your league has 2 quarterbacks, it's going to change up your draft a lot, okay? If it has 2 quarterbacks, I'm drafting a quarterback early. I'm not waiting on one, okay? If your league has 3 wide receivers, I'm going wide receiver heavy over running back. If your league has 2 flex positions, that's going to make an impact. 2 tight ends. So everything about the format and the roster of your league and what the commissioner is going to allow and what the league is going to allow in your league is going to be huge, and you should pay attention to that. So again, big tip here is to look at the roster and also look at the format of your league. Next tip is a very important one that I use consistently. I do this before every draft, and I recommend you do this before every draft, but you can do it anytime as well, and that is to read the depth chart of every single team in the NFL. Now, I know it sounds like a lot of work, but it's really not. You can go on ESPN, Yahoo, and whatnot, and they usually have depth charts for all 32 teams, and it's just offensive positions. Unless your league is playing defensive positions, I don't know. And again, that goes back to format and roster size. That is going to have a big impact. But usually you play offensive positions, right? And so the sites will have the depth charts of all 32 teams. It'll give you who's going to be the projected starter. It'll give you names at each positions. And this is huge because usually at running back, every year you'll have some new starters that people won't know about, okay? And people will assume that the start of last year is going to be the start of this year. And in training camp, maybe the new guy has beaten them out. And that goes hand in hand with also reading up on news about training camp, who's winning the depth chart battles, who's playing well, who's not playing well, and knowing that, the positions that you are about to draft, these guys are going to be starters, okay? So that is huge. Please, please pay attention to the depth chart. I can tell you this is going to help you immensely in your fantasy football. The next tip I'll give you, and this one depends also on the format of the roster. If it's a 2-quarterback league, then this tip really doesn't apply. But for standard 1-quarterback leagues, please wait on quarterback unless it's one of the 2, 3, 4 elite guys, okay? And I'm talking about the Aaron Rodgers, the Tom Brady's, Matt Ryan, because he won MVP last year. I'll give him that. A guy like that. And there's a very select number of these guys, okay? After that, 3, 4 names that I would list, I would not touch quarterback until the very end. And the reason I tell you this is because it's so easy for quarterbacks to accumulate points in fantasy that you can always find a quarterback that is halfway decent. Now, I like taking Rodgers and Brady early because you know what? They will consistently give you the X number of points that a lot of these other quarterbacks won't. And it's kind of comforting knowing that, hey, I got Aaron Rodgers as my quarterback. I can sleep well at night, okay? That's basically what it is because you don't have to worry about finding a new quarterback every week. Not that you couldn't. But my point being is if you are stacked at every other position, you got great running backs, great receivers, great tight ends, you can find a quarterback and plug him in each week based on matchups, and you will probably do well, okay? Like I said, outside of those top tier guys, I'm not touching quarterback until the very end. I think you can find a guy like a Phillip Rivers later. You can find guys, you know, way deep down that will do phenomenal for you that you don't need to draft up on and waste a draft pick on. So I'm waiting on quarterbacks unless it's one of the top tier guys. Next tip I'll give you, and it's sort of 2 tips in one. Try and draft handcuffs for your running backs. And I know a lot of people are against this, but let me explain, okay? Because my second tip goes along with this, which is avoid injury-prone players. So if you feel like your running back is great and he never gets hurt, fine, okay? You don't need to draft a running back. But usually at that position, running back is brutal. Chances are these guys are going to get hurt. They're going to get banged up. They're going to get nicked up. And I usually want to have the safety of having the backup, okay? Because what does having the handcuff do? I know you would be wasting the roster size and literally waiting for a guy to get hurt, but it gives you that starter immediately, okay? So it's hard enough finding starters in the draft at the back end, but even harder finding starters on the waiver wire. So you're telling me once, you know, David Johnson gets hurt or Le'Veon Bell gets hurt or these workhorses that are really good get hurt, drafting their backup and having them, usually the next guy in line turns out to be a bell cow and gets a lot of the carries. That's going to help a lot. You have an immediate starter right there. And like I said, you won't have to keep looking for a replacement because you will have one in the handcuff. Like I said, more so for injury-prone guys. I usually only do this with the running backs, but you can try with the receivers. It really doesn't work because teams run out with 3 wide receiver sets and whatnot. So I would definitely try and draft a handcuff for my running backs, especially for injury-prone ones as well. The best tip I want to give you and end with this is, and I have no other way of saying it, but just whore the waiver wire, okay? I live off the waiver wire once the season starts. Honestly, after the draft is done, the first thing I look at is I go to the waiver wire and I see, did I miss anyone that I researched on that sort of fell through the cracks that people didn't look at? And I go and pick them up and I stash them away, okay? And I do this every week, and there'll be plenty of news articles that you can find online about the pickups for the week. And I am telling you right now, with your roster size, with your team, at the end of the season, depending on how many players you draft, it could be 12 to 15 usually. I would venture to say probably 40, maybe even half your team is going to be replaced by waiver wire guys. At least that's just how it's been in my experience. The waiver wire plays such a crucial role in my success that I would probably say this is the most important tip, like I said, because the waiver wire is going to produce gems. There are guys that are going to pop off. There are guys that are going to get hurt, and the backups will be on the waiver wire. Guys, I'm telling you, live off the waiver wire. Whore it. Do not be afraid to utilize the waiver wire. That is what I do. I think that is my biggest tip for you guys. So hopefully that helps. Hopefully these tips help. Hopefully you guys do well in your fantasy football. Like I said, once again, follow me on Twitter. Follow me on IG as well. Instagram, link in the description for that. If you guys like this video, if you guys want me to do more fantasy football videos, please leave a comment down below telling me to do so. If you like this video, once again, give it a thumbs up, please. And thank you guys for watching.